My name is Isabella, and I'm 34 years old. 3 months after my husband's car accident left him with no memory of our marriage, I found photographs that fell from his gym bag, pictures of him with another woman, laughing and kissing. But it wasn't the affair that shattered me. It was the date printed on those photos, taken 4 months before his supposed amnesia. The moment I saw that timestamp, I realized the man I'd been nursing back to health had been lying about everything. What I discovered next turned my grief into something far more dangerous for him. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below telling me where you're from, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital still haunt me. That sterile hallway where I first heard the words that would reshape my entire existence. Mrs. Torres, your husband is awake, but he doesn't remember you. I ran to Ethan's room, my heart pounding with relief that he was alive. But when I burst through that door, breathless and crying, he looked at me with empty eyes. Not confused eyes. Not frightened eyes. Empty ones. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice flat and distant. I collapsed into the chair beside his bed, gripping his hand even though he didn't squeeze back. "It's me. It's Isabella, your wife." The doctor pulled me aside 20 minutes later, his clipboard pressed against his chest like a shield. "Your husband has partial retrograde amnesia. The trauma from the accident has caused selective memory loss, particularly affecting emotional recall. He remembers facts, his name, his job, basic information, but the personal connections, the feelings, those are gone." "Will they come back?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "We can't say for certain. Memory restoration is unpredictable. Some patients recover fully. Others." He trailed off, leaving the devastating possibility hanging in the air. I took a leave of absence from my teaching position the next day. Ethan needed me. He was broken, fragile, lost. I would be the one to bring him back. The first weeks were exhausting. I created photo albums labeled by year, played our wedding video on repeat, cooked his favorite meals, lemon garlic chicken with roasted potatoes. I'd sit across from him at dinner, watching him eat mechanically while I told stories about our first date, our honeymoon in Santorini, the night he proposed on the Brooklyn Bridge. He'd nod politely. Sometimes he'd even laugh. But it was the laugh of a stranger being entertained by someone else's anecdote, not the warm, knowing laugh of a husband remembering his own life. "I feel like I'm reading someone else's life script," he said one evening, pushing his plate away. "Like you're telling me about characters in a movie." I forced myself to smile, even as tears threatened to spill. "It's okay. We'll get through this together." But the emotional distance grew wider each day. He avoided physical intimacy, turning away when I tried to kiss him, stiffening when I hugged him. At night, he'd sleep on the very edge of our king-sized bed, as far from me as possible, without falling off. His parents visited often, too often. His mother, Patricia, swept into our home like she owned it, reorganizing our kitchen cabinets and questioning my every decision. "Are you sure he should be eating that? Too much sodium." "Isabella, he needs his medication at exactly 6 p.m., not 6:15. Maybe you should let him have more independence. You're smothering him." I bit my tongue every single time, reminding myself that she was worried about her son. But the way she looked at me, with barely concealed contempt, made my skin crawl. One afternoon, as I walked her to the door, she paused and said quietly, "Maybe this accident is a sign. Maybe you two weren't meant to last." I closed the door and cried for an hour. Ethan began developing new personality traits that unsettled me. Before the accident, he'd been passionate, sometimes volatile, always intense. Now he was eerily calm, too polite, too measured. He started taking long walks alone after dinner, claiming he needed to clear his head. When I offered to join him, he'd decline with a gentle smile that somehow felt cruel. Our therapy sessions were supposed to help. Dr. Reeves, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an unreadable expression, would ask him questions while I sat in the corner, holding my breath. "How do you feel when Isabella shows you photos from your past?" Curious. Detached. Like I'm looking at someone else's memories. "And how does that make you feel, Isabella?" Dr. Reeves would turn to me. "Like I'm losing him all over again." After one session, Dr. Reeves pulled me aside. "You're doing everything right. Your dedication is remarkable. But he's not getting better." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes amnesia frees people from lies they told themselves. It can be liberating for them. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. 3 months after the accident, Ethan announced he wanted to join a gym. "I need to rebuild my strength. Find some mental clarity." I was thrilled. It was the first proactive step he'd taken toward recovery. I helped him pack his gym bag that evening: shorts, t-shirt, water bottle, towel. He zipped it up and slung it over his shoulder, and for a brief moment, I saw a flash of the old Ethan. Confident. Purposeful. "I'm proud of you," I said, touching his arm. He looked at me for a long moment, and I thought, I desperately hoped, that maybe something was breaking through. But then he just smiled, that polite, distant smile, and left for his morning workout. That night, he did something he hadn't done since before the accident. He kissed my forehead. "You're a good person, Isabella," he whispered. It should have made me happy. Instead, it felt like a farewell. The next morning, I watched him leave for the gym, through our bedroom window. He paused by his car, checking his phone, and when he looked up, I saw his reflection in the rearview mirror. He was smiling. But it wasn't the gentle smile he showed me. It was something else entirely. Something that made my blood run cold. I turned away from the window, telling myself I was imagining things. But deep down, in a place I was too afraid to acknowledge, I knew something was very, very wrong. It happened on a Tuesday morning while Ethan was at the gym. I was doing laundry, sorting through the pile of clothes he'd left on our bedroom floor. His gym bag sat unzipped on the chair, and as I lifted it to check the pockets, he always forgot receipts and loose change. A small manila envelope slipped out and hit the hardwood floor. Photographs scattered across the wood like fallen leaves. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Even from where I stood, I could see what they were. My legs gave out. I sank to my knees and picked up the first photo, with trembling hands. Ethan, my husband, laughing with his head thrown back, his arm wrapped around a woman's waist. They were standing on a dock, a lake shimmering behind them, golden hour light painting them in warm tones. She was beautiful, long dark hair, delicate features, her head resting on his shoulder. She looked happy. He looked happy. I grabbed another photo, the two of them kissing, his hand cupping her face with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in, God, how long had it been? Another photo, them sitting on a porch swing, her hand intertwined with his. I noticed the necklace she wore, a ring dangling from a thin gold chain. I leaned closer, squinting. The design was familiar, ornate, with a small emerald in the center. My heart stopped. It was the same design as my wedding ring. My hands shook so violently that I dropped the photos. They fluttered back to the floor, and that's when I saw it. The detail that changed everything. In the bottom right corner of each photograph was a date stamp. Not from a phone. These were printed from an actual camera, the kind my father used to use. Digital dates embedded in the film processing. June 14th, 3 years ago. I stared at that date until the numbers blurred. 3 years ago. June. That was 4 months before Ethan's accident. For months before his supposed memory loss. For months before he claimed he couldn't remember our first year of marriage, couldn't remember our wedding day, couldn't remember me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He remembered. He remembered everything. The amnesia started after the affair. Which meant what? That he'd been lying this entire time? That the blank stares and confused questions were all an act. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him immediately, to throw these photos in his face and demand the truth. But something held me back. A cold, calculating voice in my head that whispered, if he's been lying about this, what else has he been lying about? I gathered the photos with numb fingers and shoved them back into the envelope. My mind raced through possibilities, each more devastating than the last. I needed evidence. Real evidence. Not just affair photos, but proof of the deception. Ethan kept his old laptop in the study. He'd switched to a new one after the accident, claiming the old one was too slow. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? I was too busy trying to help him heal. I booted up the ancient Dell, my fingers drumming impatiently on the desk as it whirred to life. His password was still the same, our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I opened his documents folder and started clicking through directories. Tax returns. Work presentations. Random screenshots. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed a folder labeled with a random string of numbers, 847392_BU. The files inside made my stomach turn. Videos. Dozens of them. Timestamped from 2 and 3 years ago. I clicked on one randomly. It was Ethan and the woman, I refused to learn her name yet, at a cabin. They were cooking together, laughing, dancing in the kitchen to music I couldn't hear. He spun her around and dipped her, kissing her deeply. The video was shot from a tripod. Staged. Romantic. Deliberate. I closed the video and opened another folder. Receipts. Hotel stays. Dinner reservations. Weekend trips to the Catskills. Wine tastings in the Finger Lakes. Every receipt was dated from the year before his accident. The year he'd told me he was working late on a major project. The year he'd canceled our anniversary trip because of a last-minute client emergency. My vision blurred with tears, but I forced myself to keep looking. There had to be more. I opened his email archive and searched for the woman's name. I'd spotted it on one of the receipts. Melissa Chun. Hundreds of emails. Love letters, really. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. We'll figure out a way to make this work. And then one email from just days before his accident. I can't keep living like this. I need to make a choice. Give me 2 weeks. I promise I'll handle everything. I slumped back in the chair, my mind spinning. 2 weeks. And then the accident happened. But what if it wasn't an accident? I thought back to that day. Ethan had left early in the morning, claiming he needed to drive to a client meeting upstate. He'd kissed me goodbye, a real kiss, I remembered, which had surprised me because we'd been distant for months. I'd chalked it up to stress. He'd been driving alone on a remote road when the accident happened. Or at least that's what the police report said. Single vehicle collision. He'd swerved to avoid a deer, hit a tree. No witnesses. I grabbed my old journals from the bookshelf and flipped through the entries from that time. There, dated 1 week before the accident, Ethan canceled our anniversary trip again. He says there's an important meeting he can't miss. I'm starting to feel like I'm not a priority anymore. The meeting that never existed. The trip he took with her instead. I pulled out my phone and looked up directions. The road where his accident happened. I entered the address from the police report and watched the map populate. The route led directly toward the Catskills, toward the same area where all those hotel receipts were from. My hands clenched into fists. It wasn't an accident, I whispered to the empty room. You were going to her. But why the amnesia? Why the elaborate charade of not remembering me? Unless the amnesia was fake too. Unless it was all part of a plan to what? Leave me without having to leave me? To make me the caretaker of a man who no longer knew me, while he lived his real life somewhere else. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop looking. You'll only hurt yourself more. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Who was this? How did they know I was investigating? Another text arrived before I could respond. He's not who you think he is. And you're not the first wife. Attached was a photo. Ethan, younger, maybe 10 years ago, standing outside a courthouse with another woman. Both of them were smiling, holding what looked like a marriage certificate. My vision tunneled. The room spun. I gripped the desk to steady myself, forcing air into my lungs. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't even just a fake amnesia scheme. This was something much, much bigger. I deleted the texts immediately. Some instinct told me I shouldn't let Ethan know I'd received them, and sat in the darkening study as the sun set outside. When Ethan came home an hour later, I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. Smells good, he said, setting his gym bag down. Lemon garlic chicken, I replied, my voice steady. Your favorite. He smiled that polite, distant smile and headed upstairs to shower. I looked at the gym bag sitting by the door, the envelope of photos hidden inside. I looked at the knife in my hand, still slick with chicken grease. And I whispered to myself, if he can erase me once, he'll do it again. But not this time. This time, I'm the one rewriting the story. I couldn't sleep that night. While Ethan snored softly beside me, or pretended to sleep, I no longer knew which. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment since the accident. Every doctor's visit, every therapy session, every sympathetic look from friends and family. Had it all been theater? At 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to Ethan's home office. The door creaked slightly as I opened it, and I froze, listening for any movement from upstairs. Nothing. I turned on the desk lamp and started rifling through the filing cabinet where Ethan kept his medical records. The folders were meticulously organized: insurance claims, hospital discharge papers, therapy session summaries. I pulled out the thickest folder labeled St. Catherine's Hospital, October 2022. The discharge summary was on top. I'd read it a dozen times before, but now I examined it with new eyes. The paper felt wrong. Too crisp. Too white. I held it up to the light. The letterhead looked authentic, but when I compared it to an older medical bill from a routine checkup 2 years prior, I noticed subtle differences. The font was slightly off. The hospital logo's shade of blue didn't quite match. My pulse quickened. I kept digging. Buried in the middle of the stack was a single sheet that didn't match the others. It was folded in half and wedged between 2 pharmacy receipts. I unfolded it carefully. It was another discharge summary from St. Catherine's, dated 2 weeks before the accident. Not from the emergency room. From the outpatient psychiatric unit. Patient presents with moderate anxiety and situational stress related to major life decisions. No evidence of organic neurological damage or cognitive impairment. Prescribed short-term anti-anxiety medication and recommended follow-up counseling. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. No neurological damage. 2 weeks before the accident. He'd been seeing a psychiatrist for anxiety about major life decisions. Like choosing between 2 women. I photographed every document with my phone, then carefully returned them to the folder exactly as I'd found them. As I was closing the filing cabinet, I noticed something odd. The bottom drawer, usually locked, was slightly ajar. Inside was a single manila envelope. No label. I opened it. More medical documents, but these were different. These were template files, blank discharge summaries from St. Catherine's, printed on authentic letterhead. 3 or 4 different versions, all slightly different formats. Like someone had been practicing. I sat back on my heels, the realization settling over me like ice water. He'd faked the medical records. Or, at least altered them. The next morning, I called Ethan's therapist's office. I kept my voice light and friendly. Hi, this is Isabella Torres calling. I'm trying to verify some insurance information for my husband's sessions. Can you confirm what date his treatment started? The receptionist clicked through her computer. Let me see. Ethan Torres started sessions on September 15th, 2022, and his last session was 3 weeks ago. My heart stopped. 3 weeks ago? Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. Would you like to schedule another appointment? No, thank you. That's all I needed. I hung up and stared at my phone. September 15th, that was 2 months before the accident. And his last session was 3 weeks ago, which meant he'd been continuing therapy throughout his supposed amnesia. But he'd told me his therapist was Dr. Reeves, the woman we saw together for couples counseling. He'd never mentioned individual therapy. Was Dr. Reeves even real? Or was that another fabrication? Over the next few days, I watched Ethan with new clarity. I noticed things I'd dismissed before. The way he called me Clarissa, occasionally my full name, which only my mother used. He'd never called me that before the accident. It was a tell, I realized. When he was stressed or distracted, the performance slipped, and he reverted to formality. The way he avoided our wedding photo in the hallway but had no problem looking at other pictures around the house. The way he flinched, just barely, when I mentioned specific memories, like our first kiss or the night he proposed. As if hearing about them caused him discomfort rather than confusion. One evening, I decided to test him. We were having dinner, some pasta dish I'd thrown together, and I said casually, "Do you remember our wedding day?" He looked up from his plate, that familiar, polite smile appearing. "You've told me about it. You said yes before I even finished asking." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was screaming. That was wrong. Completely wrong. When Ethan proposed, I'd been so shocked that I'd actually fainted. He'd caught me, we'd both laughed, and I'd said yes 5 minutes later when I'd recovered. It was one of our favorite stories. The man sitting across from me had no idea, because he wasn't remembering. He was guessing based on what he thought a proposal should look like. "Right," I said softly. "That's exactly how it happened." He went back to eating, satisfied that he'd passed the test. That night, I drank half a bottle of wine alone in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile floor, whispering to myself, if he can erase me once, he'll do it again. But I wasn't going to let him. The next day, I was grocery shopping when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're not the first wife." It was the same number from before. This time there was an attachment, a photo of a marriage certificate. Ethan Michael Torres and Diane Patterson. Dated 12 years ago. Filed in Nevada. I abandoned my shopping cart in the middle of the produce section and sat in my car, staring at the photo until my eyes burned. 12 years ago. That was before we'd even met. Had he been divorced? He'd never mentioned a previous marriage. Never. I texted back. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "Someone who knows what he's capable of. You need to be careful." "Why are you helping me?" "Because I was you once. He's doing to you what he did to her." Don't let him finish. Finish what? No response. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, waiting for another message. Nothing came. When I got home, Ethan was in the living room, watching television. He looked so normal, so harmless. The concerned, recovering husband who was trying so hard to rebuild his life. I wanted to scream at him, throw the evidence in his face, demand answers. Instead, I smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'm home. How was shopping?" he asked, not looking away from the screen.
"Fine."
Just the usual. I went upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom. I pulled up a private browser on my phone and searched Diane Patterson, Ethan Torres, Nevada. The results were sparse, but I found an old Facebook profile. Diane Patterson, now Diane Reeves, living in Boulder, Colorado. Her profile was mostly private, but her profile picture was public. My blood turned to ice. It was Dr. Reeves, our couples therapist. Ethan's supposedly objective, professional counselor was his ex-wife. I gripped the sink to keep from collapsing. The room spun. Nothing was real. Nothing had ever been real. Every therapy session where she'd encouraged me to be patient, to give him space, to understand that recovery takes time, she'd been in on it. She'd been helping him. I thought back to her words after one session. Sometimes amnesia frees people from lies they told themselves. She'd been telling me the truth, just not in the way I'd understood. That night, I pretended to sleep while Ethan got up at 2 a.m. I heard him go downstairs, heard the quiet murmur of his voice. He was on the phone. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened, getting suspicious. I need to move faster. No, she won't figure it out. Trust me, Mel, I've done this before. 2 more months, and everything transfers. Then we're gone.
Mel.
Melissa, the woman from the photos. I retreated to the bedroom before he came back upstairs. When he slipped back into bed, I kept my breathing slow and even, playing the role of the oblivious wife. But inside, a cold fury was building. You've done this before. 2 more months. Everything transfers. He wasn't just having an affair. He was executing a plan. A plan he'd done before. With Diane. And now with me. I waited until morning, until Ethan left for his gym session, before I grabbed my phone and called the only person I could think of who might be able to help. Torres Detective Agency. How can I help you? I need to hire a private investigator, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My husband is committing fraud, and I need proof before he disappears with everything. Ma'am, we'd be happy to help. When can you come in? Today.
Right now.
I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up, grabbed my purse, and walked out of the house that no longer felt like home. As I drove toward the detective's office, I whispered to myself, if he played dead emotionally, I'll dig up every ghost he left behind. Detective Marcus Avery's office was nothing like I'd imagined. No noir film aesthetic, no wall of case files, and dim lighting. Just a clean, modern space in a downtown office building with minimalist furniture and a wall of framed credentials. Avery himself was in his late 50s, retired from the police force, with silver hair and sharp, assessing eyes. He gestured for me to sit across from his desk. Mrs. Torres, you mentioned fraud on the phone. Tell me everything. I pulled out my phone and started showing him the photos, the affair pictures, the falsified medical documents, the discharge summary from 2 weeks before the accident. Then I told him about Diane, about the mysterious texts, about the conversation I'd overheard at 2 a.m. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. This is more extensive than I initially thought. You understand that some of this might require law enforcement involvement. I don't care about that right now. I need to know the scope of what he's done before he realizes I'm onto him. I need leverage. Avery nodded slowly. Smart. Give me 48 hours. Don't change your behavior at home. Act completely normal.
Can you do that?
I thought about the years I'd spent taking care of a man who was performing amnesia.
Yes.
I can do that. 2 days later, Avery called me to come back to his office. The look on his face when I walked in told me everything I needed to know. This was bad. I'll start with the medical records, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. The hospital ID numbers on your husband's discharge papers from the accident? They don't exist in St. Catherine's system. I have a contact in their records department. These documents were never generated by the hospital. He created them himself? Or had someone create them? But it gets worse. That attending physician listed on the neurological assessment? Dr. Richard Chin? He died 5 years ago. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Your husband used a deceased doctor's credentials to fabricate medical evidence of a condition he doesn't have. That's not just fraud, Mrs. Torres. That's potential insurance fraud, disability fraud, and, depending on what claims he filed, possibly criminal fraud. What about the affair? The woman, Melissa? Avery flipped to another section of his file. Melissa Chen works as an insurance adjuster for Horizon Claims. And here's where it gets interesting. She was the adjuster assigned to your husband's car accident claim. The room tilted slightly. She processed his own fraudulent claim?
Correct.
And I pulled the records from DMV and insurance databases. Her personal car insurance and your husband's accident claim were filed by the same agent on the same day, October 15th, 2022. They coordinated it. That's my assessment, yes. Avery pulled out another document. I also looked into his financial records, the ones that are public anyway. Your husband opened 3 offshore accounts in the last 2 years. 2 in the Cayman Islands, 1 in Switzerland. He's been funneling money out of your joint accounts through something called investment opportunities. I thought back to all the times Ethan had mentioned investing in cryptocurrency or startup opportunities. I'd trusted him. I'd signed papers without reading them carefully. How much? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Conservatively? About $340,000 from what I can trace. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was our savings. My inheritance from my grandmother. The money we were supposed to use to buy a bigger house, to start a family. There's one more thing, Avery said quietly. I tracked down the storage facility your husband rented after the accident. He told you it was for old work files, correct? I nodded. I spoke with the security guard there. Your husband visited that facility last week. I obtained footage. He turned his laptop around. The timestamp showed 6 days ago, late evening. Ethan pulled up in his car, opened the storage unit, and spent 40 minutes inside. When he emerged, He was carrying a medium-sized duffel bag that hadn't been there when he went in. What was in the bag? I can't say for certain, but based on the weight and how he carried it, I'd guess cash. Lots of it. He's preparing to run. That would be my conclusion. I sat back, processing everything. The false amnesia, the fraudulent medical records, the offshore accounts, the accomplice girlfriend who worked in insurance, the storage unit full of cash. Ethan hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been methodically planning an exit strategy. And I'd been too busy playing the devoted wife to see it. What do? I asked. Avery pulled out a different folder. First, we protect your assets. I have contacts with a lawyer who specializes in these situations. You need to immediately freeze all joint accounts, close shared credit cards, and transfer any remaining marital assets into a trust under your name only. Won't that tip him off? Possibly. But if you don't do it now, he'll clean you out before you can blink. The legal route takes time, and time is something you don't have. I took the lawyer's information with shaking hands. Second, Avery continued, we need to document everything without him knowing. I'm going to set you up with a small recording device, completely legal in this state as long as one party consents, and you're that party. Wear it whenever you're around him. We need him to slip up, to say something incriminating. And if he doesn't, then we use what we have to go to the authorities. But I'd prefer to have ironclad evidence before we do that. The offshore accounts alone aren't enough to prove intent to defraud. We need him to confess, or we need to catch him in the act. I spent the next week walking through my life like a ghost. I smiled at Ethan over breakfast. I kissed him goodbye when he left for the gym. I asked him about his day when he came home. And all the while, I was systematically dismantling our financial life. I met with Avery's lawyer contact, a sharp woman named Rachel Huang, who moved with terrifying efficiency. Within 3 days, she'd frozen our joint accounts, claiming they were under audit. She'd transferred the remaining funds, about $80,000 that Ethan hadn't already siphoned, into a legal trust in my name. She'd closed our joint credit cards and opened new ones under only my name. He'll notice eventually, Rachel warned. When he does, things might get ugly. Do you have somewhere safe you can go? Not yet. Get one. Soon. I also started wearing the recording device Avery provided, a tiny microphone that clipped to my bra strap, invisible under clothing. It transmitted to a secure server that only Avery could access. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. Ethan came home from the gym agitated, his jaw tight. He went straight to the home office, and I heard him on the phone, his voice sharp and frustrated. I pretended to be cooking dinner, but left the kitchen door open. What do you mean the account's frozen? That's not possible. No, she doesn't know anything. She's too busy playing nurse. Well, fix it, Melissa. That's what I pay you for. I stirred the pasta slowly, my heart hammering against the recording device. He came out 20 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral. Something smells good. Just spaghetti. Nothing fancy. We ate in tense silence. I could feel him watching me, assessing. Finally, he said, have you been checking our bank accounts lately? No, why? No reason. I just noticed some irregularities. Probably a bank error. Want me to call them tomorrow?
No.
Too fast, too sharp. He softened his tone. No, I'll handle it. Don't worry about it. That night, after he fell asleep, I received a text from Avery. Got it. That's enough for now. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. When I arrived at his office the next morning, Avery looked grimly satisfied. I've been doing more digging while you gathered evidence at home. I found something significant. He pulled up a file on his laptop. The car accident. October 15th. Do you remember the details? Single vehicle collision. He swerved to avoid a deer, hit a tree. According to the police report, yes. But I requested the full accident investigation file through a FOIA request. It took some time, but I finally got it. He turned the screen toward me. These are photos from the accident scene. Look at the car. I studied the images. Ethan's sedan, crumpled against a tree, front end smashed, windshield spiderwebbed. Notice anything odd? I looked closer. The airbag didn't deploy?
Correct.
which is strange for that level of impact. So I had a mechanic friend of mine look at these photos. He pointed out several things. The damage pattern is inconsistent with hitting a tree at speed. The impact angle is wrong. And most tellingly, he zoomed in on a detail. There are no skid marks from braking. None. What does that mean? It means the accident was staged. He deliberately crashed his car at low speed, probably rolled it gently into the tree, then called it in. The damage looks dramatic, but it's actually relatively minor. No real injuries, no airbag deployment, no hard collision. But the hospital records said. The hospital records are fake, remember? He was never seriously injured. He walked into that hospital, complained of head pain and confusion, and then created false documentation to support a traumatic brain injury diagnosis. I stared at the photos, my vision blurring.
Why?
Why stage an accident? Because he needed legal cover. Think about it, if he just disappeared with your money, you could report him missing, file for fraud, hunt him down. But if he had a documented medical event that caused amnesia, he becomes a victim. Someone to be pitted, not prosecuted. And while everyone's focused on his recovery, he empties your accounts and builds a new life with his mistress. But he couldn't just disappear eventually. People would look for him. Avery's expression darkened. Mrs. Torres, I need to ask you something difficult. Did your husband have any life insurance policies?
Yes.
A large one through his company. $2 million, I think. Why? And you're the beneficiary? Of course. We're married. Avery closed his laptop slowly. I want you to go home, pack a bag, and stay somewhere he can't find you for the next few days.
Today.
Right now.
What?
Why? Because I think the amnesia was never the endgame. I think he was building towards something else. And I think you might be in real danger. The blood drained from my face. You think he was going to? I don't know. But staged accidents, fake medical records, offshore accounts, and a $2 million life insurance policy with you as the beneficiary? That's not a man planning to divorce you. That's a man planning to make you disappear. I drove home in a daze, Avery's words echoing in my head. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was there. He wasn't supposed to be home. I walked in through the front door, my keys jingling too loud in the silence. Ethan? He appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, Clarissa. My blood ran cold. He never called me that. About what? He descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, each step measured. About why our bank accounts are frozen. About why you've been meeting with lawyers. About why you think I don't know what you're doing. I backed toward the door, my hand reaching for my phone. He smiled, and it wasn't the polite, distant smile I'd grown used to. It was the smile from the photos. The real Ethan. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? He asked softly. I've been 3 steps ahead of you this entire time. My fingers found my phone. I pressed the emergency button blindly, praying. The thing is, Isabella, he continued, using my real name for the first time in months, you were never supposed to figure this out. You were supposed to be the grieving widow who everyone felt sorry for. But you just had to go digging. The police are on their way? I lied. He laughed. No, they're not. But it doesn't matter. By tomorrow, I'll be gone, and you'll have nothing. No money, no evidence, no proof. Just the word of a crazy woman whose husband tragically lost his memory. I have proof. I have everything. Do you? He pulled out his phone. Because I have texts from you begging me not to leave. Emails about your paranoid delusions. Medical records, real ones, documenting your increasingly erratic behavior. Who do you think they'll believe? The brain-injured victim or the unstable wife? The room spun. He'd been building a counter-narrative, setting me up to look like the crazy one. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Avery. Police en route. Stall him. I'd had the emergency recording activated this whole time. You're right, I said quietly, buying time. I have nothing. You win. He studied me suspiciously. Just like that. Just like that.
I'm tired, Ethan.
I'm tired of fighting. Take whatever you want. I don't care anymore. He relaxed slightly, the predatory tension easing. Smart choice. For what it's worth, this wasn't personal. You were just convenient. The right timing, the right financial situation. How many times have you done this? He smiled. You're the third. Diane was the first, but I was sloppy. She figured it out too soon. The second one. He shrugged. She didn't figure it out at all. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Ethan's head snapped toward the window, his expression shifting from confidence to panic in an instant. What did you do? What you should have realized I'd do, I said, my voice steady now. I fought back. The police burst through the door 30 seconds later. As they handcuffed him, Ethan looked at me with something like respect. You were smarter than the others. I'll give you that. I wasn't smarter, I replied. I was just angrier. They led him away, and I sank onto the couch, my entire body shaking. Detective Avery arrived 20 minutes later with a team of investigators. We got everything on the recording, Mrs. Torres. His confession, the mention of previous victims, the threats. Combined with the evidence we've already gathered, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. What about the others? The previous wives? We'll investigate. If what he said is true, this case just got much bigger. I nodded numbly. What happens now?
Now.
Avery sat down across from me, his expression gentle. Now you rebuild. And you do it with every penny of that money he tried to steal. The courts will freeze his assets, and you, as the legal spouse, will have first claim on everything. The settlement will be substantial. I don't want his money. It's all tainted. Then donate it. Start a foundation for fraud victims. But don't let him take anything more from you, Mrs. Torres. You've lost enough. As the investigators combed through my house, cataloging evidence, I thought about Avery's earlier words in the car. Ma'am, you're about to be very wealthy. I didn't feel wealthy. I felt hollowed out, excavated, empty. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in months. I felt free. The days following Ethan's arrest blurred together. Detective Avery worked tirelessly, pulling threads I hadn't even known existed. Each discovery felt like another knife wound, reopening trauma I thought had already reached its limit. I sat in Avery's office 3 days after the arrest, watching him lay out photographs across his desk like a macabre puzzle. These are from the accident scene investigation, he explained, pointing to an image of Ethan's crumpled sedan. I had our forensic consultant examine them more closely. Look here. He zoomed in on the car's interior. No blood traces anywhere. Not on the steering wheel, not on the non-deployed, airbag, nowhere. For someone who supposedly suffered a traumatic brain injury severe enough to cause amnesia, that's impossible. Maybe he was just lucky? Mrs. Torres, I pulled the paramedic report. The signature belongs to someone named James Mitchell. I tracked him down. He's not a paramedic. He's a handwriting analyst who creates dummy templates for insurance training simulations. My stomach turned. A fake paramedic report? Completely fabricated. And here's where it gets more interesting. Avery pulled up another file on his laptop. I accessed your husband's hospital intake records, the real ones, not the ones he created. He checked himself into St. Catherine's claiming neck pain and confusion. But the attending physician's notes say, and I quote, patient alert and oriented. No signs of head trauma. Recommended CT scan. Patient refused. He refused the scan that would have proven he wasn't injured.
Exactly. He knew what he was doing.
He created just enough of a paper trail to make the amnesia claim believable, but not enough actual medical testing to disprove it. I stared at the documents, my hands trembling. What about Melissa? How deep does her involvement go? Avery's expression darkened. Deeper than I initially thought. I pulled her employment records from Horizon Claims. She's been working there for 8 years, and in that time, she's processed exactly 17 accident claims that later turned out to be fraudulent. Your husband's was number 18. She's done this before. Multiple times. We believe she's part of a larger insurance fraud ring. The FBI is now involved. But specifically regarding your case, He slid another document across the desk. She listed herself as your husband's emergency contact under a different last name. Sarah Blake. I picked up the paper, reading the intake form. There it was in black and white. Emergency contact, Sarah Blake. Relationship, sister. She had full medical decision-making power during his supposed recovery. She could have authorized any treatment, signed any paperwork, without you even knowing. The betrayal cut deeper. While I'd been agonizing over every therapy session, every medication, every small sign of improvement, Melissa had been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating the entire charade. There's more, Avery said quietly. Your husband used an alias to purchase property before the accident. Aaron Blake. I found the deed, a lakeside cabin in the Catskills. Purchased 1 week before the crash. The cabin from the photos. The same one. And Mrs. Torres, the purchase was made with a cashier's check for $180,000. Money that came from a joint account he'd opened in your name, without your knowledge. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. He stole from me to buy a love nest.
I'm sorry.
I know this is difficult. I thought back to the weeks after his accident, sitting in that hospital room, holding his hand while he stared at me like a stranger. All of it had been calculated. The distant looks, the confused questions, the emotional withdrawal, it was all performance art. What about the day of the accident? I asked. Can you prove it was staged? I believe so. I reconstructed his timeline using cell tower data and GPS from his phone, which he conveniently lost in the accident, but I was able to recover data from the carrier. He left your house at 6:47 a.m., claiming he had a client meeting. But his phone pinged towers heading toward the Catskills, not toward any client location. Avery pulled up a map on his screen, showing a red line tracking Ethan's route. He stopped at a gas station at 8:15 a.m. Security footage shows him filling a small container with gasoline. Then he drove to this location. He pointed to a spot on the map, remote section of Route 28, and at 9:33 a.m., his phone went dead. He destroyed it. Or disabled it. Either way, no more tracking. But here's the crucial part. The accident was reported at 10:47 a.m. by a passing motorist. That's over an hour of unaccounted time. I believe he spent that hour staging the crash, disabling the airbag system, positioning the car against a tree at the right angle, creating damage that looked dramatic but wasn't life-threatening. I pictured Ethan, cold and methodical, orchestrating his own fake accident. Not panicked, not scared, just calculating. The 911 call transcript is interesting too, Avery continued. The motorist who reported it said your husband was conscious, walking around, examining the car. He only claimed to be confused when the ambulance arrived. Performance, I whispered. Precisely. And one more thing, I found this in his storage unit. Avery pulled out an evidence bag containing a small notebook. It's a planning document. Detailed steps for faking amnesia, manipulating medical records, transferring assets. And Mrs. Torres, this notebook is dated from 3 years ago. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He'd been planning this for years. The weight of it all crashed over me. 3 years of planning. 3 years of lies. While I'd been loving him, trusting him, building a life with him, he'd been plotting how to destroy me. I need to know about the others, I said quietly. He mentioned previous victims. Who were they? Avery closed the laptop, his expression grim. That's going to be the focus of our next conversation. Because what we've uncovered about Diane Patterson and the second wife, Mrs. Torres, your husband isn't just a con artist. He's something much more dangerous. The next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. Under Avery's guidance and Rachel Huang's legal protection, I executed a plan that would have seemed impossible to the woman I'd been 6 months ago, the devoted wife playing nurse to her injured husband. Rachel worked quickly to secure my assets. Every penny that Ethan hadn't already transferred to offshore accounts was now locked in an irrevocable trust under my sole control. The joint credit cards were closed. The house title was transferred entirely to my name through an emergency court order, citing his arrest and fraud charges. He'll try to claim marital assets when this goes to trial, Rachel warned during one of our meetings. But given the criminal charges and the evidence of fraud, you have a strong case for keeping everything. I don't care about the money, I said, and I meant it. I care about making sure he can't do this to anyone else. Then we need to be strategic. The DA is building a criminal case, but we need to ensure your civil case is airtight too. That means gathering every piece of evidence, every witness, every document. Detective Avery had been busy with exactly that. He tracked down Diane Patterson, Dr. Reeves, as I'd known her, in Boulder, Colorado. She'd agreed to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution for her role in our couple's therapy sessions. She claimed she didn't know the full extent of his plan. Avery told me over the phone. She thought she was just helping him exit a marriage he felt trapped in. But she admits to falsifying therapy notes and encouraging you to be patient when she knew he was faking. What about the second wife? The one he mentioned. That's where it gets complicated. Her name was Jennifer Hartley. She married Ethan 7 years ago in Oregon under his Aaron Blake alias. They were married for 2 years before she died in a hiking accident. My blood ran cold.
Died.
Officially ruled accidental. She fell from a cliff during a solo hike in the Columbia River Gorge. But given what we know now, the FBI is reopening the investigation. I sat down heavily, my legs giving out. You think he killed her? I think the circumstances warrant a closer look. She had a $500,000 life insurance policy with him as the beneficiary. He collected the money, moved to New York, changed his name back to Ethan Torres, and 2 years later, married you. The room spun. I'd been married to a possible murderer. I'd shared a bed with him, cooked meals for him, believed his lies. Mrs. Torres, I need you to focus. We're going to use this information, but carefully. Right now, Ethan's in custody on fraud charges. The life insurance angle and Jennifer's death, that's a longer investigation. But we can use the pattern to demonstrate premeditation and danger. What do you need me to do? Right now? Stay safe. Stay visible. Make sure you're never alone in situations where he or his associates could reach you. Melissa Chin posted bail yesterday. Terror shot through me. She's out. Under strict conditions and electronic monitoring. But yes, which means we need to be cautious. She's facing her own charges, and desperate people do desperate things. I spent the next several days in a hotel under a fake name, per Avery's instructions. Rachel arranged for a security detail, a stern-faced woman named Martinez who sat outside my door and accompanied me everywhere. During that time, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started going through every memory of my marriage, looking for signs I'd missed. The late-night phone calls he claimed were work. The weekend conferences that I never attended. The way he'd sometimes call me by the wrong name and then laugh it off as exhaustion. I found our old credit card statements and highlighted every suspicious charge. Dinners for 2 in cities where he'd claimed to be in meetings. Hotel rooms booked during times when he'd told me he was staying with colleagues. Jewelry purchases I'd never received. The evidence of his double life was everywhere. I'd just been too trusting, too in love, to see it. One evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Isabella. It was Melissa's voice, tight with anxiety. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you.
Please.
Just listen. He's planning something. From inside. I sat up straighter, gesturing for Martinez to come closer. What do you mean? He's got people on the outside. Friends from his old insurance fraud network. They're planning to. Her voice broke. Look, I didn't know how bad this was. I thought we were just helping him get out of an unhappy marriage. But the FBI showed me things. About Jennifer. About others. Isabella, you're in danger. Why should I believe you? Because I'm next on his list. He set me up to take the fall for everything. I just figured out. All those offshore accounts? They're in my name, not his. The fake medical records? My fingerprints are on them because he had me deliver them to the hospital administrator as part of my job. He's making sure that if this falls apart, I go down and he walks. I gripped the phone tighter. Tell me what he's planning. There's a guy. Someone he knew from his time in Oregon. He's dangerous. Ethan told me once that this guy solved problems for people. I think he's been contacted. To do what? Melissa's voice dropped to a whisper. To make sure you don't testify. Isabella, you need to tell your detective. You need protection better than what you have. The call ended abruptly. I immediately called Avery and relayed everything. Within 2 hours, my security detail doubled and Melissa was brought in for questioning. Her testimony changed everything. She brought documentation of the insurance fraud ring, names of other participants, and, most damning, recorded phone calls between her and Ethan where he explicitly discussed his plans to frame her. He's been playing everyone, Avery said after interviewing her. Diane, Melissa, you, probably Jennifer too. He finds women who either have money or access to money, marries them, manipulates them, and then when he's extracted everything he can, he disappears. Sometimes permanently. What happens now? Now we go on offense. The DA is upgrading charges to include conspiracy, racketeering, and they're seriously looking at murder charges related to Jennifer Hartley. But Mrs. Torres, I need to ask, are you willing to testify? Because if we go to trial, you'll have to face him. I thought about the man who'd looked at me with empty eyes in that hospital room. The man who'd let me believe I was helping him heal while he'd been calculating how to destroy me. The man who'd done this before and would do it again if we didn't stop him. Yes, I said firmly. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, more victims emerged. A woman from California who dated Ethan, under the name Marcus Torres, 5 years ago. She'd broken it off when she discovered he was married, but not before he'd convinced her to invest $50,000 in a fake real estate venture. Another woman from Florida who'd been engaged to him. She'd called off the wedding when she found suspicious emails, and 2 weeks later, her house was broken into and her jewelry, family heirlooms worth over $100,000, was stolen. Nothing else was taken. Police had never found the culprit. The pattern was undeniable. Ethan wasn't just a con artist. He was a serial predator who'd been operating for over a decade. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a navy suit Rachel had selected. Look professional, composed, credible, she'd advised. You're not the victim on the stand today. You're the woman who caught him. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting and worn wooden benches. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, Martinez beside me, as they brought Ethan in. He'd changed in jail. Thinner, harder, with a cold calculation in his eyes that no longer bothered to hide behind the mask of the charming husband or the confused amnesia patient. When his gaze found mine across the courtroom, he smiled slightly, a predator recognizing a worthy opponent. The hearing proceeded with clinical efficiency. The prosecutor presented evidence: the fake medical records, the offshore accounts, testimonies from Diane and Melissa, the staged accident investigation, the connection to Jennifer Hartley's death. Ethan's lawyer, a slick defense attorney named Morrison, tried to paint his client as a man suffering from actual psychological issues, claiming the amnesia was real and that his actions were the result of trauma and confusion. But then they played the recording from my house. My voice, shaky and small, saying I had nothing. And then Ethan's voice, clear and confident. You're the third. Diane was the first, but I was sloppy. She figured it out too soon. The second one. She didn't figure it out at all. The courtroom fell silent as his confession echoed through the space. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, something Ethan had never done in his entire life. The prosecutor asked me to describe the day I found the photos. I did, keeping my voice steady. Then the days after, discovering the fake medical records, hiring Detective Avery, wearing the recording device. Mrs. Torres, the prosecutor said gently, can you tell the court how you felt when you realized your husband's amnesia was fake? I looked directly at Ethan as I answered. I felt like I'd been caring for a ghost. Like everything I'd done, every meal I cooked, every story I told, every therapy session I attended, was part of his entertainment. I wasn't his wife. I was his mark. Morrison cross-examined me aggressively, trying to suggest I'd been unstable, that I'd fabricated evidence, that I'd misunderstood my husband's genuine medical condition. Isn't it true, Mrs. Torres, that you were prescribed anti-anxiety medication during your husband's recovery? Yes. And isn't it true that you were under significant emotional stress?
Yes.
Because I believed my husband was suffering and I was desperate to help him. Could your emotional state have caused you to misinterpret his actions? I met Morrison's eyes steadily.
No.
What caused me to finally see clearly was evidence. Phone recordings, financial documents, fake medical records with deceased doctors' signatures, and ultimately, his own confession. My emotional state has nothing to do with facts. The judge granted the prosecutor's motion to move forward with a full criminal trial. Ethan was denied bail, deemed a flight risk given the offshore accounts and fake identities. As they led him away, he turned back one last time. "You'll never be free of me, Isabella," he called out. "Everything you have, I gave you. Everything you are, I made you." I stood up, Martinez's hand on my shoulder.
No, Ethan.
You tried to erase me. But I'm the one who rewrote the ending. The trial lasted 6 weeks. It became a media sensation. The amnesia con artist headlines proclaimed. I watched from the gallery as the prosecution methodically destroyed every lie Ethan had constructed. They brought in Jennifer Hartley's sister, who testified that Jennifer had told her she was planning to divorce Ethan the week before her death. They presented evidence that Ethan had researched the hiking trail where Jennifer died weeks before the incident. They showed the jury the notebook from his storage unit, pages and pages of calculations, timelines, and strategies for manipulation. One page was titled The Memory Loss Plan with detailed steps. Stage accident in remote location.
Create confusion about events.
Refuse diagnostic testing that could disprove injury. Perform selective amnesia. Remember facts, forget emotions. Make wife dependent on recovery narrative. Transfer assets during vulnerable period. Exit strategy, either fake death or disappear with new identity. Melissa testified for 3 days, describing the insurance fraud network and Ethan's role as the architect. She admitted to processing fraudulent claims, including his, and expressed remorse that seemed genuine, though the prosecutor made clear she was still facing her own charges. Diane took the stand and described how Ethan had convinced her to marry him 12 years ago, then systematically isolated her from her family and friends. When she discovered his affair, he'd manipulated her into becoming his accomplice instead of his victim, convincing her that helping him transition out of future marriages was therapeutic work. He told me I could help other women see they were in the wrong relationships, Diane said, her voice breaking. I believed I was doing something good. I didn't realize I was helping him destroy people. The most damning testimony came from a forensic psychiatrist who'd evaluated Ethan. Mr. Torres exhibits classic traits of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. He views other people as objects to be used for his benefit. He's highly intelligent, capable of mimicking emotions he doesn't feel, and lacks genuine remorse. The amnesia claim was a sophisticated manipulation, not a medical condition. When the defense put Ethan on the stand, he tried to charm the jury. He spoke softly, claiming he'd been confused and scared after his accident, that his actions were misunderstood, that he truly loved me and had never meant to hurt anyone. But on cross-examination, the prosecutor dismantled him. Mr. Torres, you testified that you love your wife. Is that correct?
Yes.
I never stopped loving Isabella. Then why did you tell Detective Avery, and I quote from the recording, she was just convenient? The right timing, the right financial situation? Ethan's composure cracked slightly. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. And when you said, "You're the third," Diane was the first, but I was sloppy. She figured it out too soon. The second one. She didn't figure it out at all. Were you angry then too? Or were you confessing to a pattern of fraud and possible murder? I never killed anyone. But you did defraud multiple women, fake a medical condition, and steal over $300,000 from your wife. Those facts aren't in dispute, are they? Ethan's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was read in a silent courtroom. guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and theft by deception. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. I sat in the front row, wearing the same navy suit. The judge addressed Ethan directly. "Mr. Torres, you have demonstrated a callous disregard for human dignity and trust. You preyed on women who loved you, exploited institutions designed to protect the vulnerable, and showed no remorse for the damage you've caused. The court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 12 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $847,000 to your victims." 18 years. Ethan would be in his 60s when he got out. As they led him away, he didn't look at me. For once, he had nothing to say. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me. I made a brief statement that Rachel had helped me prepare. "I hope this case serves as a reminder that fraud and manipulation have consequences. To anyone who thinks they're trapped in a situation like mine, you're not. There's always a way out, and there are people who will help you find it." Later that evening, I met with Avery and Rachel at a quiet restaurant. We toasted with sparkling water. I'd given up alcohol during the trial, needing clarity more than comfort. "What will you do now?" Avery asked. I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. The house was mine. The recovered assets, plus restitution, meant I was financially secure. But those things felt empty. "I'm starting a foundation," I said, "for victims of financial fraud and manipulation. I want to help people recognize the warning signs, get legal help, rebuild their lives. I'm calling it the Second Chance Foundation." Rachel smiled. "That's perfect. And for what it's worth, you should be proud. You caught someone law enforcement had been looking for without even knowing it. That insurance fraud ring, they'd been investigating it for 3 years. You cracked it open. I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it because I refused to be erased." A week later, I visited Jennifer Hartley's grave. Her sister had reached out after the trial, thanking me for bringing attention to Jennifer's case. The FBI was still investigating, but there was renewed hope for justice. I placed flowers on the headstone and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't know about you sooner. But he won't hurt anyone else now. I promise." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for being brave enough to stop him. You saved my life. Diane." I didn't respond, but I saved the message. That night, I stood in the empty house that had once been my prison of lies. I decided to sell it. Too many ghosts, too many false memories. But before I did, I needed one final ritual. I gathered every photo of Ethan and me, every wedding memento, every piece of paper that tied me to the life I'd thought we had. I drove to the lake where he'd taken Melissa, where those affair photos had been taken. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson. I built a small fire at the edge of the shore and fed the memories into the flames. Pictures curled and blackened. Papers turned to ash. The wedding album, the symbol of vows he'd never meant, burned last. As the final pages crumpled into nothing, I spoke out loud to no one and everyone. They say love survives everything, memory loss, distance, even betrayal. But what I learned is simpler. Love built on lies is just a performance, and I finally stopped playing my part. The fire died down to embers. I scattered the ashes into the lake and walked away. Behind me, the sun set on the woman I'd been, the trusting wife, the devoted caretaker, the victim. Ahead of me, the moon rose on the woman I'd become, the survivor, the fighter, the architect of my own second chance. I drove away from that lake and didn't look back. Not even once. Like this video if this story moved you, and subscribe for more true stories about betrayal, survival, and the strength it takes to rewrite your own ending.